On the back of a very big day today as far as the CAF is concerned, where the appointment of Danny Jordaan to be the third vice president of CAF was made and was announced and obviously ratified at the end of the day. Still SAFA president as far as that is concerned. Danny Jordaan, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's been a hectic day, as you say.
Yeah, hectic, but how does the ascension into such a critical position feel for you?
Well, it comes at a time when Africa faces many problems in its structure, in its organization and delivery of football. And for people at this stage to feel that I can come in and make a contribution, I think it's a huge confidence, just not for me, but for South Africa. And so we cannot fail African football. We have to work hard. We have to turn around African football, and we have to make sure that we take the next step up. People are talking about Bafana and South African football teams just qualifying and not making it in the World Cup. But it's not just South Africa, it's the entire African continent. So what it says to me, there's still a huge gap between the best teams in Europe and the best teams in the African continent. And the best teams in the African continent is still among the poorest teams in world football. If you look at 2018 World Cup in Russia, 5 teams went there from Africa, 5 teams dropped out in the first round. You step back, 2014 in Brazil, 5 African teams, all of them out in the first round. So it would then see that African football as a whole is not making progress. If you look at the Women's World Cup, that's the Senior Men's World Cup, the Senior Women's World Cup. Banyana dropped out first round, but Cameroon and Nigeria, that is regarded as unstoppable on the continent, sneaked through. Best third place, and the next round all out. And you can go to under 20, under 17. So I think, notwithstanding the fact that we qualify, I don't think we must only think it's a South African problem. It's an African problem. And many people said, but we thought that Egypt with Salah and Senegal with Sadio Mane will make an impact in Russia. It did. So one has to look at this and see what can be done to close the gap so that the best teams on the African continent must certainly be amongst the best teams in the world. If you go to club football, you go to the Club World Cup, same story. So I think, and I think South African fans are quite correct, South Africa cannot be happy with just qualification. But to me, it's not just a problem of South Africa, the problem of the African continent.
Having mentioned all of that, and you've been here for almost a month now, and we've seen Egypt host a very successful tournament, bar the fans. You know, we play in front of 5,000 fans at a semi-final. That's disturbing. What for you is the priority as you step into the position of third vice president within CAF? What for you, I mean, 2 main things that you would really want to whittle down, change perception about the continent of Africa when it comes to football?
Well, one thing that should never happen is that in this AFCON, the off-the-field political issues were as prominent and sometimes, I think, dominant over football. So you have to get back to the reality that our core business is football, and these administrative issues must be addressed. Good governance, transparency, accountability, the forensic audits, the modernization of the way we organize football. Those things must be accelerated. So by the time we come to the next AFCON, there must not be a line in the newspapers to talk about anything other than Mo Salah and Sadio Mane.
Because corruption is difficult to run away from, because that's part of the perception again. that I talk about of the African football is that it's always so closely aligned to corruption that you have to bring an outside person in FATMA to come through and so-called help. Yeah, there was a unanimous decision in terms of that was taken, but is it a necessity? Is Africa not able to prop itself up and say we can be equally as good administratively as you can ever bet?
I have no doubt that we have the capability, and many of the African officials, because some of the people here are running big, major corporations. They are captains of industry, they are multimillionaires. So it's not as if you present Africa's leaders as they don't know what they are doing, they're inefficient. No, they run big business and they are multimillionaires. But I think it is a priority that when it comes to football, we have to get full-time professionals whose business it is to deal with all of the administrative issues, financial issues, accountability, so that football can be football. If you go to the Euro finals and you read the activity around the Euro final, you are not going to read a single sentence of what's happening in the administration.
Sure.
Unfortunately, on the African continent, sometimes it requires greater analysis and greater insight to write about why is it that whether it's the club level, junior level, women's level, senior level, Africa's best is not the best when it comes to FIFA's global competitions.
Just on that one, and just to cut in, and again I use a today example, where you would talk about maybe Africa shooting itself in the foot, has to do with the South African risen to prominence as a referee. CAF tell us on their website, they tell us on their Instagram page, they tell us on their Twitter page, Victor Gomes is going to be the referee for the Cup final of the Africa Cup of Nations 2019. And then boom, we wake up to the news today that Ali of Cameroon instead, the 37-year-old, will be in charge of the game. Again, if you say Europe, if then Howard Webb was to officiate in a Champions League or Europa final, and then on the eve of that they change, that will cause distractions. I mean, that's a big call. I don't know what has happened. Maybe you know what has happened there, because poor Victor Gomes, one day he's refereeing a final, then tomorrow he's not going to be refereeing.
No, absolutely. Those are the things that shouldn't happen. And it just indicates the administrative issues that must be addressed. And so we hope, look, FIFA had similar challenges when Infantino and Fatma came. And within 3 years, there is a different FIFA.
Yeah.
And that's why people said Fatma Samora is from Africa.
Yeah.
She's an African. Because she was a diplomat, she traveled throughout the African continent. She's done a similar job for FIFA.
Sure.
FIFA is ready to say this thing is so important that we must begin on the African continent, not talk about administrative political issues. We must talk about football and begin to address the issues.
But were they able to tell you for this one why there was the change? Because everyone watching, they wanting me to help them know why. I don't have the answers.
No, as far as I could inquire, and I did, because I also got the inquiry from the media. They said it's a systems failure and all of those things. Maybe they use the system as an excuse. I don't know, but I will ask. Because it just emerged now when I came, and I think you asked the question in the press conference now. That I'll try and make a follow-up to say exactly what has happened.
Because I mean, if there's a failure by somebody within, let's say, the media or somebody's going to be fired. Somebody's going to lose a job because if it can't be CAF, then it's going to be somebody else, because their platforms were responsible for disseminating that information.
No, there are many other issues that the media has raised, you know, and whether it is a fan ID and accreditation, access to events and so on. Now, we'll have to do a review. maybe in mitigation, we can say that it was a late switch to Cairo, and therefore everything had to be put in place. I think overall the Egyptian has done an incredible job in such a short space of time. However, when you come to your elite tournament, the biggest on the continent, there cannot be any slip-ups, and we have to address it. And so I think we'll sit down and review and make sure that these things doesn't happen.
Just reverting back, and again, it's one of the bigger questions that were asked on social media when we broke the news about your third vice presidency today. Does it affect your presidency of SAFA at all? Do you continue in that role? Are you able to do both? What's the deal?
Yeah, let me say this. You know that Pinnick is the president of Nigeria and he was the vice president.
Sure.
Molefi Oliphant was also vice president of SAFA. And so Omari is the president of Congo DR and is the vice president. These are voluntary positions, not a full-time position. The administration is located in Cairo. It's largely your input and engagement. And these things can happen on the internet, over the phone, on WhatsApp, and so on. Modern communication does not require anymore that you must jump on the plane and come here for a day or two. You can stay in Johannesburg and give an hour or two and deal with issues. So there is no such requirement. And throughout the history, you had from Patel, who was the Seychelles president, vice president of CAF, and even in Europe that's the case. So no, that is not a requirement, but it is ultimately the members of SAFA that decides. They elect and they can express their view on the matter.
And another big decision that was taken, and today it was much talked about, Champions League. We saw the drama with the final that happened. Firstly, the decision to make it just one day, a final being a final, no two legs.
Yeah, I think that these things are the kind of thing in an overview of everything that has happened. You know, 5 years ago, Isaiah was the president. He called some of us, and I came to spend 3 days. And the theme was modernization of the administration, infrastructure, systems, and so on. But nothing has happened. So we are back at the same door again, so that these things can be sorted out. Because the administration delivers either quality project and make it easy for the political leadership to take decisions, or if everything comes late and last minute, then it's a problem. We're now sitting with the issue that the women's AFCON does not have a host anymore.
South Africa taking that?
Well, I don't know. We have to go and talk to the people.
Will South Africa take that, though? I mean, it's there. It's on a silver platter.
And it has increased now from 8 teams to 12 teams. It's something that we'll have to discuss, and whether it fits in the trajectory for women's football in our country, because we have a clear pathway. We're going to launch a league this year. Women's football is on the up.
Sure.
But the point that I made, the gap between the best on the continent and the best in the world, or even the best in Europe, it's still a massive gap.
Right, just in winding up here, and I can see you got quite a lot of people waiting to chat to you. It's almost a week since Bafana Bafana touched down in Johannesburg. Stuart Baxter having made a couple of calls about what's to be, what cannot be at the press conference. Maybe also saying things that might have not made South Africans too happy about it. You said at the last press conference we held that you're waiting for a report from him to talk about AFCON and the expectations. What's the way forward from a coaching perspective? Where does that lie in us moving forward?
Well, as I've indicated, I've just spoken to the CEO that towards the end of this month, July, and first week in August, we have to receive all the reports. We have to bring our technical committee, because the technical committee are the coaches. And I raised with them this particular issue. Why, if Banyana is so dominant in Africa, they lost a penalty shootout, otherwise they could have been crowned the champions of women's football on the continent. And yet, you can see the gap. Even Nigeria and Cameroon, you see the gap. You have to address this issue. Because we cannot just say our teams go there, they drop out, and all of us do the same thing. Senegal, even Egypt. We have to address that issue. So they have to look at that. They must also look at our current squad. And I think if you look at the group of players that was here, and you look at Lodge and Maboy, for example, young players, together with Pasika, they can serve for many, many years in that team. And then outside it, you had Kigandole injured, you had Lebogang Piri, you have Thabo Tele, you have Luther Singh, Lyle Foster. We have a group of players that I think can bring Bafana back. Now what we need to do is to get a coach to build, because the best performance in this AFCON everybody talks about is Bafana's performance against Egypt. And the question then is, why is it not consistent?
So you say get a coach, current coach, or get a coach? Which one will be
That's
that?
a technical committee.
Okay.
We say, look, this is where we are. We went to the quarterfinal. We came within 2 minutes of making it to the semi-final, because Nigeria was on the knees. Percy Tau says, when I look at the clock at 2 minutes, I was praying because I was going to finish them. It takes personal responsibility, because they couldn't run with him anymore.
He was the last player to leave. He was kneeling down on the ground, being the last South African to leave.
Yes. He says, I've made up my mind. If we get into extra time, we're going to destroy this Nigerian team. Because, you know, it is the striker that gets close to those big defenders and hear them laughing and puffing and not seeing that they are finished. I'm going to finish them. And he says, I looked to the clock again, 2 minutes, and then disaster. He said, you know, I've lost many matches. I've never felt so bad, because if we had to get into the semi-final, we would have gone to the final. That was his assessment. So I think the players, it took a long time to believe, but once they got there and they have the belief, this is football. It's a cruel game.
Fate.
It's a cruel game. One mistake and you're home. And that is the problem. But I think it's one of the issues. Because it was a cross and a goal against Morocco. It was a cross and a goal for Nigeria.
Set pieces.
And
critical stage of the game. You shouldn't be giving away set pieces around there.
And I told them.
It's exactly what Nigeria then did.
All of the teams
against Algeria.
Even Senegal. They say, you know, one of the things that we can't do, and you can see their approach to South Africa. They say one of the things that we can't do, we can't go toe-to-toe with South Africa. But one thing we know, wait for 70 minutes and later, South Africa will start spilling passes, they will lose position, they will make mistakes, back passes. Remember the goal of Senegal? That is what Senegal says. We cannot play you, so we defend. We wait for 70 minutes to 90 minutes. In that period, you're going to make mistakes. And one mistake, we're going to deal with you. Otherwise, to try and be fancy with you and play. Now I see even Nigeria has adopted that thing. As people said back home, we never saw Nigeria approach to bus parking. But you saw two layers of defense, which was strange to see for a Nigerian team. Well, they don't have a Sunday Olasey, JJ Okocha, Daniel Amakachi, and so Kanu. Maybe they should play within their own limitations.
Sure.
But I think we have excellent players. We now need to build a cohesive, competitive, determined team that plays for 90 minutes, and when we go into extra time can go there and play. And look at the goal of Algeria. And in this tournament, most of the goals were scored from 70 minutes on. And halftime, most of the matches were 0-0.
I mean, there's a heat factor. There's so many different factors that have come into play here.
No, it was.
I would ask you if Stuart Baxter is your man for the future with Bafana Bafana. Are you the president of the association?
It has to be a scientific approach. I can voice my view, but I'm not the one who's going to take the decision. It's the national executive, based on the reports that will come through, and that is not just for Baxter. It's also for Banyana. It's also for under 20. The under 23 is still on the road now for Tokyo, and we have an excellent team there too. So we have the players. I just spoke to the CEO that he must get our coaches now to go into Europe. We have 80 players in Europe.
Because Kaeli Shabane was breaking into the Leicester City first team. Couldn't even break into the under 20 team.
That is
something strange.
Because no, let me not discuss too much that thing. But the fact of the matter is, we have to engage our players there, and our coaches must go there. And that is what we said. You must go and engage them, talk to them, follow up. And today is easy. One meeting, you get all the details. You set up your system, and they send you video feeds so that you can see the progress. Because young players, now the player is nervous, he cannot pass properly, he's not strong enough. 6 months later, he's a different player. He's strong, he's arrogant. Yes. So particularly in Europe, they develop quickly. So that's why we need to track them, and they must be integrated as part of our under 20 team, under 23, and ultimately Banyana.
Well, it was right here at the very same Cairo Marriott Hotel with the backdrop of the traffic, non-stop hooting, the Nile River in the backdrop as well, where the big decision was made and taken to ascend Danny Jordaan into the third vice president of CAF. Still remains the SAFA president. Thank you so much for joining us on MarawaTV.
Thank you, MarawaTV, and all the best.
Thank you so much there, Dr. Danny Jordaan, joining us right here on MarawaTV.